Hello and welcome to the Baseball Wisconsin podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gotzler. All right, we made it to the sixth inning here of Game 7, where we sit down with head baseball coach at Westosha Central High School, Jake Morman. Now, before we talk about Westosha Central baseball, I got to apologize. I've been slacking. I was down in Arizona at spring training for a few days, trying to squeeze out one more trip before the season begins, but I promise I'll get my last few episodes out here. All right, back to the episode. Westosha Central, last handful of years, has been making an ascending leap in the state of Wisconsin. Play one of the most competitive conferences in the state. State tournament 2022, state tournament 2024, where they went to the semis last year, as well as winning the conference championship. And talking with Jake, he's an alumni, a lot of family ties. He's in the building. They have a unique style of play. When you play them, we played them, lucky enough, in 2022 up at Appleton in the quarterfinals. And just watching them from a distance where I am, they seem to just continue to be growing and growing as a building, as an athletic department, and as a baseball team and an entire program. So this episode, Jake's going to tell us how they do it, the ins and outs of their season, how they run things. And without further ado, head baseball coach at Westosha Central, Jake Morman. Hey, Coach, how you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, hey, for the listeners, give us some background. Where'd you grow up? What's your journey in baseball and teaching, and how'd you get into coaching?
Yeah, so I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Still live in Kenosha, Wisconsin to this day. Graduated at Shoreland Lutheran High School. Was a 3-sport athlete there: basketball, baseball, football. Then I went after Shoreland. I went to Wisconsin Lutheran College for 1 year to play both football and baseball. Had a pretty significant injury in football that kind of derailed my college athletic dreams. And then from there, I transferred to UW-Whitewater and graduated in education there. So that was kind of my journey in, school and where I kind of grew up. Still reside, did my student teaching at Westosha Central. Shortly after that, I got hired as a teacher retired, and then took over the baseball program here at age 25.
All right. So before I get to those early days of you as a head coach at 25, I'd like to hear just where'd you get the itch to coach? Obviously, you were an athlete. Injury cut your playing career short. You got an education. So it had to sound like coaching was kind of something you've been thinking about for a while.
Yeah. I mean, baseball, has always been and coaching, really, sports in general, has always been such a huge part of my life. And I give that credit really to my dad at a early age, just, putting me in sports. I was involved in everything, whether it be playing with friends outside or recess or being involved in, lots of different activities. It was always kind of a priority for me. And quite honestly, even, going to school, sports is kind of what drove me. And motivated me. And I knew it was something that I always wanted to do and be a big part of my life. I knew, when you're a young kid, you think you're going to grow up and play in the major league someday. And, those dreams evolve over time. And coaching was kind of the next, best thing, and which led me into education because I knew that was something that I wanted to be a part of. But yeah, my dad was a big influence. I had a lot of great coaches and mentors that, kind of shaped me and kind of drove me to education. So.
It's such a common story on these shows, like dads, sons, being around the game, being around, a gym or a field, and just kind of kids being kids and just, being in love with being around young people and staying involved. And, it just brings me to those days when now you're a first-year head coach, you're 25 years old. And, take us back to those days, man. Like, what were those days like? What have you learned since then? Obviously, I still consider you a young coach. I think we're probably a similar age, but now we got kids and houses and, we're real grown-ups now, but we still feel like kids at times. Anyways, take us back to when you're 25, first-year head coach. Like, what's going through your head and what mistakes did you make?
Yeah, I mean, you're 25 years old, you get a job, you kind of get thrown in the fire a little bit. And I remember to this day, the very first conversation I had with a group of seniors and just telling them, it doesn't matter that I'm a first year coach. It doesn't matter. I actually got the job kind of late into the off season. And I just told them, like, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to win. And we're going to win a lot. And we're going to win a conference championship. And that's going to be our focus. And when you walk into that job for the first time, I think back to all the things and really all the stuff that I didn't know as a young coach, and sometimes I cringe thinking at some of the stuff I did. But you think you're going to come in and you're just going to win and you know it all, and some of the stuff that you do, practice planning, and some of the mistakes that I made along the way were just, you spend so much time on the skill development and the practice plans. Some of the things that I wish I would have known that I do probably a lot better job now, and you continue to improve, is just building those relationships and realizing how important the relationships with the players are. And those things last a lot longer than the wins and the losses. But yeah, just being a young coach coming in, there's a lot of good to it too. Being a little bit naive to the whole process, that in some respects is, I wish I could go back to that, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. But yeah, just a lot of really good memories. For me, I've always been really fortunate here. I've been blessed with a lot of talent and support from administration and kids. So my first year, I think we won 18 games, and you leave that season going, man, wow, that wasn't hard at all. That wasn't, that was pretty easy. And then the next year you come back and you go, 10-14, and you realize like it's really difficult, especially playing in the conference that we play with and the coaches that coach here. Every day is a grind. It's a battle. So.
Well, I'm glad you went there. Like, some of the conferences across the state, everybody likes to battle how good their conference is, and it's a great discussion, and there's really no correct answer. But, like, you've also been around some fantastic guys in your area. Other coaches you've coached against, like in your area, in your conference, you look up to. I think about some of the Hall of Famers in your area. Like, what do you pick up that they're putting down, as you watch them go about their business? And you can only see so much on a game day, right? There's so much more that goes into it than the 7 innings that are played in a pregame. But as I bring up some of those things, are there things that you notice across the diamond, that those moments you're like, wow, like we got to learn some lessons here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll speak to one for. We've been chasing Burlington's program for a long time. Scott Stouty, Hall of Famer this year, have nothing but tremendous respect for their program, everything that they do. I remember telling him my third, fourth year, what I envision my program wanting it to look like is what his team is. It's just a team that consistently, every pitch of the game is putting pressure on you, whether it be in the bunt game, the run game, how their kids battle, how their kids pitch, how they execute, their mental toughness. They're just never out of a game. When you leave playing them, you're exhausted because every pitch is just it doesn't matter whether it's the first hitter of the game or the 4 hitter in a big spot. They can lay down a bunt, they can hit and run, just tremendously well coached. So that's definitely a program that when they take the field for warm-ups, we're paying attention. When I'm standing in the third base box, I'm watching what their coaches are doing and how they're interacting with their kids. And there's a reason he's in the Hall of Fame, because they've had tremendous success, and it took us a long time. This was our first year since 2002 where we won a conference championship. And that's something we've been chasing for a long time. And we've been preaching to the guys about changing those numbers on the banners hanging in the gym and all that stuff. And a lot of times fell just short to Burlington. So we knew along the way we had to change some things and do some things. And, but that's definitely a program that I look up to and respect a lot.
And I was hoping you'd go there. And, obviously Stouty listens to this, and he's a Hall of Famer, and he's the president of our association, just retired from there. But I think that means a lot. I think we've all had those moments as coaches. And honestly, if you haven't had those moments as coaches, I think you're probably not looking, right? So it just means a ton that, you can see those things from across the diamond, and that's really important. Well, let's go back into your program. We talked about where you were, some of the changes you make. Give us kind of the flyover view right now. Like, how many kids are at the high school? How many teams do you carry? We're staring down pitchers and catchers week in a couple weeks here, then tryouts. Like, how do you guys structure things?
Yeah, we're a school of just over 1,300, growing pretty rapidly over the last couple of years. We've been really fortunate here. We passed a pretty big referendum and upgrades to our athletic facilities, the baseball field. We got turf on our infield now. It's just, it's been a game changer. We keep We have roughly about anywhere 60 to 70 kids per year that try out. It hasn't always been that way. I remember when we first started, we were just over 40. We carry 3 teams fairly easy right now, probably even, pushing maybe having a JV2B team at some point if we continue to grow. Um, and I think that's just a credit to baseball in this area, how fast baseball is growing everywhere, the popularity of it, in our game. I think back to 10, 12 years ago, and I talk about this with our coaching staff all the time. The baseball talent in Wisconsin is just really taken off. I mean, 10, 12 years ago, you might have had a guy that was throwing upper 80s and you'd see it once in a while. Now it seems like every team's got at least one of those guys, and guys going and playing high level baseball. So we get roughly that 60 to 70 number. How do we structure our tryouts and pitchers and catchers week? When I think about, it's kind of evolved. I think, the WIA making the change for us to have pitchers and catchers week ahead of time has really been a benefit to our kids because it allows us just to focus on those guys, and gives them a little bit more time to get ready. Obviously, kids are all, a lot of my kids all play high level travel ball and they all have their routines and programs and pitching coaches. But it allows us just to kind of simplify and break down and kind of talk about what we want to get done. We generally that week have, 2 days where we have our varsity level junior, senior type kids come in, whether it be a Monday, Thursday. And then we have, another group come on that Tuesday, Friday. And we try to have our freshmen, we split them up. We make all freshmen come in, whether they're a pitcher or not, because we want to see what, if they can pitch. Obviously, high school is a little bit different than travel ball. You got to have lots of guys and lots of arms. So that's kind of how we break that up for the pitchers and catchers week. And then, their conditioning and stuff that they get done that week. Tryouts, that's something that's always a conversation every year. I do think to a certain extent, tryouts do work better for me when they're in the gym. Because of the cage situation and myself being able to see everybody in the program. Obviously we have open gyms and things, and we come in with a pretty good idea of where kids are at and all that other stuff. But, just being able to have eyes on everybody and give them proper feedback. We split up the coaches, whether it be infield, outfield, you can kind of put yourself in those groups to start. And then we just, we evaluate. When it comes to cut day, I'm a big believer in having conversations with every single kid in the program. We call them into the office and the coaches are there and I do pretty much all the talking individually from freshman on up to senior. It can take a long time. Just kind of where they're at, where they fit, what their role is right now. Can that role change? And if they didn't make it, explaining to them why they might not have made the team, but also, emphasizing and telling how much we respect them coming out and how difficult these conversations are. I think it's important for kids to understand that, even if things don't always work out, you still got to be able to have those difficult conversations with kids. And I think the respect that, I have for them, I want them to understand that, that day for all coaches is the hardest day, right? You're ending some kid's baseball dream early on, whether it be freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. It's not going to be easy for them to understand that and go through that. And I think just having that conversation and being there for them and letting them know that even though their baseball journey this year might have ended, my door is always open and come talk to me and we can have a conversation.
No, I appreciate you doing that. I think the other thing I want to ask you about tryouts is do you guys do more like of a practice planning, like you run a practice and see how guys go? Do you do more of a showcase? Do you try to do some live, a little bit of both? How many days do you typically give? And that might be different this year. I know by us, it's spring break week. I'm guessing most of the states in the same boat. So like you said, it's always evolving, but give us a little bit more on tryouts.
Yeah. So tryouts, we typically run it as a traditional practice, just with larger groups, probably more that showcase feel. Up in our cages, if the infield group is coming up to hit first, we'll usually have, a machine cage so coaches can evaluate there where we amp up the speed just a little bit. We'll have we'll have tee work stations and soft toss stations and short toss stations, all kind of up there where we're evaluating. On the infield portion and outfield portion, we do try to get the outfielders outside, even if it's just down on the football field where it's turf, so that we can see them, judge fly balls, catch fly balls. We can work relays and cuts there. So we try to structure it in a traditional practice. We don't necessarily get into the weeds of bunt coverage and first and thirds and all that stuff. It's just more about evaluating, their fielding mechanics and arm strength and all that stuff. We don't do a lot of lives during tryouts. Honestly, the tryout days, pitchers, because we've seen them during pitchers and catchers week, we don't spend a lot of time in those first 2 to 3 days with our pitchers, unless it's a guy that we foresee, pitching in that first week. And I do tend to schedule games pretty early, just because you never know what the weather's like. And if it's going to be 80 degrees that first week that we're eligible to play, we better take advantage of it. So that's kind of how we do it. Our tryouts usually last 2 days, and we have those conversations after that second day, and we give them their teams and those conversations. Spring break week here is always a little bit different. Now, I'm very fortunate early on in my coaching career. I've been fortunate with the same athletic director the entire time I've been here. I give out the days of tryouts, even if it's over spring break, almost a year in advance. And kids know that if you're going to be a varsity level player, that you have to be here for spring break. And administration supports me on that. Other sports, and they get off, track gets off, softball gives off. But if you're a baseball player, you're here over spring break. And that's just how we do it here. So.
I appreciate you saying that. I think that's one of the most common questions coaches talk about. And every building, every administration is different. To coaches, they're like, man, I would never. Who would ever take their kid to Florida, to wherever they're going? So to have administration have your back on that, I think really sets the tone for how seriousness of your program. And I know not all programs can do that. I've talked to a bunch of coaches at the clinic that are in all different boats. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right. So tryouts is over. You have your meetings, team placements are done. You get into your varsity season. What are some things that make your program unique? What are some things that you guys kind of hang your hat on as a varsity team?
Yeah, I mean, I would, even before we get, I to backtrack a little bit here, I think I don't know if it's unique to our program. I think all, good programs have some level of leadership development. And I would say really in the last 4 to 5 years, when our program has kind of, in what I would deem taken the next step, we've spent a lot of time on leadership development. That was the one thing that I thought, how do we, when you're losing conference by a game each year, you reflect and you evaluate. And one of the things that I kept coming back to is how do we, ride the highs, but also when, you're going through those lulls of the season, how do we respond to those things better? How do we become more of a mentally tough team? So one thing that we do here that I implemented about 4 years ago, we do something called senior leadership meetings that start in the fall. And I limit it to the seniors because I think that I want them to feel like this is unique to them and special to them. And I want them to be the ones that take ownership of the program. So when we have those, meetings, it's not necessarily just leadership in baseball. It's more leadership in life. And what does that look like? What is, sometimes, being a leader can be unpopular, and, taking ownership. And what does leadership look like when you're, starting versus not starting, or you were a starter and now you're not a starter? How can you still lead in those situations? And through those conversations, you see guys just open up once you develop that trust level, and you start to have difficult conversations, and you see one kid kind of put himself out there. It's really cool to see kids kind of open up. And I use myself as an example and put, different scenarios out there where, sometimes during the course of a season, I, as a coach, I'm going to screw up. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to have a bad send, right? Just like, I'm going to get on them when they make mistakes. And I think by building that trust level with the seniors and putting kind of the ownership on them and letting them choose the theme for the year, I think the relationships that I have with them has really just improved our program. And I've seen a significant change in how we handle different situations that come up across the year. So that's something we've spent a lot of time on. We talk about character, integrity, what is success? How do we, you know, how do we act in the dugout, being a champion in everything we do, not just on the baseball field, but in life, in the classroom. And we put a big emphasis on classroom in our program, and GPA, because that's going to take them a lot further in life than the game of baseball probably will.
All right. So a couple things I want to touch on there. So you said about 4 or 5 years ago you made that switch. Did something happen in your career? How did you make that pivot? Because you to take that leap, obviously you're seeing the benefits down the road, and we're talking about it now in 2025. At the time, it was probably putting you in a little bit of a vulnerable situation. Is, can you really do this? But did something push you over the edge to make those decisions to invest this time and resources into your program?
Yeah, I think I personally felt that there was a disconnect between, and there's always going to be this disconnect between players and coaches, right? But I just felt like some of the things that we were expecting in our program, or some of the messages that the coaching staff was bringing to the players, was getting lost. And it seemed like I needed to kind of put myself out there. I needed to build these relationships on a deeper level. And that's not to say that I wasn't trying to do that, but it was something in an area of reflection that I felt I needed to do a better job. I needed to talk to these kids. I needed to get to know them on a deeper level than just the baseball aspect of the game. And even to the point, like, I carry that stuff over into the season now. I don't always like to throw batting practice in practice, because it doesn't allow me to see the guys or talk to the guys. I like, sometimes now we have a lot of times our assistant coaches do it, because it allows me to walk around and just check in with guys. Like, how are you doing today? There's a lot going on in, teenagers' lives, right? They're making decisions. They got girlfriends and all this other stuff. There's a lot of things that can go on, and just checking in with them, grabbing the pulse of the team, communicating with a kid if he's lost playing time or if he's struggling, and just having those conversations. I think it was just an area that I felt I needed to personally do a better job, and I think through some of the changes, and we still got a long way to go, right? We're always growing and improving, but I think it's been a net positive for our program for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other piece that stands out to me is, right, your full-time job, right? So I know you kind of you touched on a little bit, like, what do you teach, and how does that role impact you as a baseball coach? Obviously, a baseball focused show, but just thinking about you being in the building, in the district. I know you got your own young kids. You're kind of all over the community now. So maybe talk about that aspect of coaching your program.
Yeah, I'm a PE teacher here at Westosha. I teach health, most of the weights and fitness classes. So I have a unique role there. I see a lot of athletes daily, so in lots of different sports, and so I have that unique perspective. I am very deeply involved in this community. I have 4 little kids. I have a daughter that's a volleyball player here, but so I'm involved. I coach a lot of the youth sports. Another unique factor is both my dad and my grandpa went to school here. So, through and through, I'm a Central Falcon, and being able to just be in the school and be a part of the community. I live in the district as well. Um, you know, Being, especially in the weights and fitness component, just being able to push kids and challenge kids beyond what they think they're capable of, not just athletes, but all students. I tell people all the time, like, I I love my job. Every day is different. I get to, work with, kids of all different backgrounds and desires and, you know, environments and things like that. And I just, get to have real life conversations with kids, and I get to push them and challenge them. And I think all of that kind of makes me the coach that I am today. Um, and we're always refining ourselves and reflecting and how can we improve. So
Well, I think that's, I picture you in your community again. Like I said, dad went there, grandpa went there. Like you have this tremendous background. You're everywhere in the community. You got 4 kids. You're in the building. Like, but you're also kind of a target in the community at times. I'm sure there's times in which you wish you could be a little more incognito, but that's part of it. You've made that personal decision to do all those things. And to be a pillar of your community, as much as you probably don't want to hear that in a good way, because you're a very humble guy. But like, you talk about being a Falcon, down there, like that's who you are, and that pays huge dividends. And how do you manage it? Like, how do you do all of it? I mean, the guys who listen to these shows are coaches and guys just like you and I, and you got your teaching job, you got little kids, you got older kids, you got like, how do you manage it all? Like, what strategies do you have?
yeah, I mean, number one, I think anybody with a family, you got to have a really good support system at home, right? Like my wife is the rock of our family, right? When I'm off doing what I love to do, coaching, she's at home running the kids to a million different practices and kind of taking on that role. And obviously couldn't, and being supportive of me chasing my dreams as well as my kids. Obviously, in order to do this job well, um, you got to invest a lot of time in it. So, and usually the people closest to you are the ones that are sacrificing their time. I've been very fortunate. I think you got to surround yourself with really good people as well. I've been fortunate with the coaches that I have. Um, they love the game of baseball just as much as I do. I try to surround myself with people that aren't just yes people. I want people that push me and challenge me, and we have those difficult conversations and how do we do things better. The only pride I have is how do we make this program the best that it can possibly be. And I think if you surround yourself with people and you have an administration that supports you in doing things the way that you believe it should be done, which I do, um, you know, it makes all the time commitment, the lifting, the open gyms before school at 5:30 in the morning, the running from practice to practice, worth it because you can see your investment and the time that you're putting in. It's making a difference, not just in this baseball community, but in the feeder programs and I feel very fortunate to be a part of a community that really invests in this school. So.
Well, you've mentioned a few times now that supportive administration and an invested community and a growing community, and if it's facilities or every other thing. And a lot of people maybe look at your guys' baseball record and think, okay, they're in one of these runs right now. Appleton, first conference championship since 2002. Players are committing here, all these things, but it doesn't come easy. Nothing worth doing comes easy, and do have your leadership challenges. You've had individual situations, individual players. I mean, every program has these. So I think it's important for people to know that no matter what level your program's at, and how much success, wins and losses wise you may have had, there's still, issues that go on in your program. So what have you learned in regards to like handling really difficult situations? Because you have to have difficult conversations. You have to make tough decisions. Like, what have you learned about yourself or your leadership style going through some of those moments?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Number one, I think first of all, in order to do anything, you got to be yourself. You can't try to be somebody you're not. I think one of the things that I learned very early on is you're never going to make every single person happy. So whether you're winning, losing, doesn't matter. You know, there's some people are going to be happy because their kids playing, some aren't. But if you set the expectation, if you're consistent in what you expect, um, I think at the very least people can respect that. um, you know I've learned a lot just about not letting things bother me, understanding how difficult it is to be successful, how important it is to communicate, and there's that how to handle adversity, how to at the end of the day I have to be myself. And I'm a person, my faith is a big deal to me. And I want that, every day when I come in, I want that to be reflected in who I am as a coach. To be a servant leader and to represent Christ in my life is super important to me. And I want my, at the end of the day, I think the game of baseball has presented me with, a great opportunity to use the gifts and talents that I believe have been given to me. And if I can just keep that as my focus and on a daily basis, at the end of the day, no matter how it ends, when it ends, I can put my head down and sleep well at night.
I appreciate you going there. And I think oftentimes we talk to coaches and teachers, and it's more of a vocation than a job. It's more of, you're not just punching a clock. You choose to do these extra things, and a lot of people like to compare teaching and coaching, and I get why they do it. But one thing I think that gets lost in the shuffle that you mentioned on is like in your class and in my class. I mean, there's a path to success for every kid. In theory, every kid can get an A. Every kid can have what success looks like. And I know as a team, if a kid can be a star in their role, they can have success. But man, you're inevitably going to have kids who just aren't hitting where they want in the lineup. They aren't in the pitching rotation. They aren't starting. They aren't getting the innings. And, in a community like yours where it is so competitive and kids are playing high-end club ball and expectations are what they are, which has its positives, there is a negative side to that too. So that kind of rolls into my next question. Like, how do you handle these expectations? If it's preseason rankings or what you did the previous year, or you're trying to defend a conference championship or go back to Appleton, how do you address that with your guys? How do you keep it focused on the mission? Just walk us into that a little bit.
Yeah, number one, I think, since I've been here, we don't shy away from expectations or what our goals are. We, at the beginning of the year, we give a sheet to all the guys. We want to know what their team goals are, what their individual goals are. We want them to be goal oriented because I think that's important. And when preseason ranking come out, we don't shy away from it. We embrace it. We talk about it, and we talk about what that means, right? The expectation that sets for the program. How do we meet that standard? Embrace, we talked about just the other day, I mentioned it to a guys because, they see the preseason rankings and embracing the target, because there is a responsibility to that. But then we also talk about all preseason rankings are a result of what you've done in the past. And I think if you keep that focus, and we talk a lot about, one of the things that we said all through last year was staying humble but hungry every day. At the end of each game last year, we would come together, and if we won the game, we always have this moment of celebration. And I tell them, like, winning is difficult, and we should always celebrate that. But then we always finished after every time we broke down, but we haven't accomplished anything yet. And I think just keeping that mindset of there's more work to be done, we can continue to improve, whether it just be that, 1% each day, staying focused on how do I get better in this drill? How do I win this pitch? How do I compete? I think the more we talk about that and we ingrain that in our guys and into our practice plans and preach, compete, I think the more success, we can have. But we don't shy away from it. Since I've been here, I've talked about wanting our program to be considered, one of the best in the state. From a championship perspective within the conference, but also how do we get to be the Kimberleys, the Arrowheads, the teams that are consistently there year after year. And I think the biggest thing that, we focused on is just how do we do the little things better? And, along with that leadership piece, I would probably say that's, we spend a lot of time on the small details of the game, whether it's, the bunting or the moving runners or the importance of getting a runner from second to third. And we build that stuff into our practice plan. And I think, that's how we keep those, keep guys hungry. How do we keep practice fresh? How do we give them something that they might not get, on their travel teams or their summer teams, that, those details that might, get lost because summer teams and travel teams sometimes become showcase events, right? And those details aren't focused on.
All right. I'm glad you went there because I talked to a lot of coaches in our situations, right? Suburban schools with travel ball kids, and going to have some kids coming through that have different levels of college baseball. And they're getting phenomenal off-season training, and I think we're at a point now, hopefully in the state of Wisconsin, where people look at travel and club ball and high school ball as a working relationship to best serve our kids. And I can't speak for every community, but I know it's important to you. It's important to me, important to guys that listen to this too. How do you go about that? Is there a way that you guys have worked internally? You said that each of them serves a different purpose. How do you make the individual a collective? How do you bring those guys together and put emphasis on the things that really do move the needle? Not that the other skills aren't important. You know that. We all know that. But how do you make them from individuals into a team? That's a real skill coaches have.
Yeah, I think part of it is you need them to. It's really hard right now. We live in a day and age where it's a lot about me, right? And there's everybody's seen the sayings over there, me or we over me and all that stuff, and it's easy to say that stuff, but it's difficult to get a guy to understand, moving a guy from second to third with a ground ball to second base, or asking a guy to get a bunt down that's only gotten a bunt down once maybe in his entire life, to buy into that. And I think the more we celebrate it, I guess in my experiences, the more we emphasize it in practice, the more we celebrate it, the more we get guys to celebrate when other guys do those things, and then having success from it, right? I think back to last year, we bunted 3 straight guys in a row and all 3 guys got on base. Well, that alone, right? Now the dugout's excited. We get guys to buy in. Next guy comes up and gets a double or something like that. That creates buy-in. I think also building those relationships and having those deeper level conversation creates buy-in, because it can't just be a high school baseball team versus what my travel baseball program does. And I think early on my mindset probably was high school versus travel, but now I'll specifically use pitchers, for example. All these guys have their own pitching coaches and routines and programs and things like that. For me to just come in when I, on March 17th and be like, this is the way you're going to do it, even though for the last 6 months you've been doing it, you're, a different way with a different guy. I think that's doing a disservice to the kid. So we tell kids, if you have a program, bring it into us. Let us take a look at it. You continue your program. Let's make sure that you're ready to go by the start of the season. And along the way, I can learn from, some of these pitching coaches and these hitting coordinators. And, the beauty of the game of baseball is it's not just a one size fits all, right? You can have 10 different, hitting stances and pitching, mechanics and things like that. So let's do what's best for the kid. And I think by having that conversation and being open to that, kids are more receptive to things that we see and want to tinker with and change. So.
And that's an interesting point, right? If it's from the club ball academy, these are full-time guys that are working with these kids. I mean, this isn't just some dad with a fungo. People are paying top dollar for top dollar instruction, and to think that we can't learn anything would be a little naive. So I love that approach. I think probably the other approach is you have college guys going off, coming back, probably giving you information on what they're doing at their level, at any level, at Division I, Division III, JUCO. Are there any other programs that you follow or anything that guys have brought back to you that you're like, yeah, we're definitely implementing that?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've had, I had Garrett Gilbert a few years ago went on to Creighton and caught there for a while. So I'm always picking their brains. I got a kid, Adam Swatolski down in Nashville pitching right now. So we're always picking their brains and seeing different drills that we can do and ways that they do things. But I think as far as an advocate for our program, when they come back, they talk about some of the stuff that was valuable that they learned here. I think there's something unique about high school baseball that's different than travel baseball. In some respects, high school baseball is a lot more like what college baseball. It's every day, right? It's a grind. You got to come to practice from 3 to 6 or whatever time you got your practice scheduled for. And I think when those guys come back and they talk to guys about, the importance of lifting weights and the day-to-day practice habits that you create. And they're telling guys that a lot of the stuff that we're doing in our program is the stuff that they're doing here, over whatever college, A, B or C, doesn't really matter. That goes, a long way to the other guys in the program. And I think we've developed, open gyms are obviously a big deal, but we've developed kind of, with the seniors taking charge, them creating the ownership that just passes down to now when the juniors this year or seniors next year, they see what it's supposed to look like. So kind of creating what being a Falcon baseball player looks like. And, I think that's really important.
Well, when I think of Falcon baseball, I know we've had a chance to play each other, but you guys are just tough, man. You guys just are never out of the fight. You seem to just you get down, you got an uncanny ability to come back. You seem to just fight your way. Again, you talk about going to Appleton, which we'll get to in a few minutes, but you're slaying dragons all the way through. If it's through your conference, through a sectional, to get to a state tournament, you got to play incredible baseball against incredible teams who have studs all over the place. How have you built that confidence? How have you and your staff, what is it about you guys? Can you put your finger on what it is that makes you guys unique in that regard? Just that confidence that you guys have.
Yeah, I think, by doing the small things and focusing on them, we give and we preach all the time about just compete, right? Win this pitch, right? Maybe winning that pitch just means fouling it off, making a guy throw 5 or 6 extra pitches where now the pitcher's out of the game by the 5th or 6th inning. Because we do see so many guys that are, legit studs, right? Throwing hard and it's going to be a low scoring game. So being able to move the baseball and still compete and find ways to score or scratch across a run or two, I think that has really helped us. I think I've been very fortunate. I'm a big believer in multi-sport athletes, and the adversity that they face in those other sports. I think, the last couple of years I've been really blessed with a few of those guys that have kind of taken on major leadership roles. And when they get into those big spots, the spot is never too big for them because they've seen it before, whether it be in a basketball game or a football game or, high level volleyball. They're ready for that moment and they thrive in it really. I think back to 3 years ago when we made it to the state and we faced you guys there. That team was remarkable at coming back late in games. We came back in the 7th inning, I think 6 times out of our last 9 games we faced and found ourselves playing in the state tournament. And that was just a credit to, a bunch of those guys just grinding out at bat after at bat, just finding a way and believing that they could do it. And I think that's what makes high school baseball so special. You're playing for something other than just the next tournament on a weekend, right? That banner lasts in the gym forever. Compared to, next weekend I get to play for something else or a different tournament. So I just think, investing in having those conversations and how do we remain mentally tough, and just talking when they come off the field, just believe, how do we limit the damage done right now? Keep it to a run or two. Those bad innings are always going to, come throughout the course of the year. But if we can keep it to a run or two, we keep ourselves in the game and now we come back. Thinking back to last year's team, we did that all season long. And usually when we gave up a run or two, almost immediately we responded. And I think that's just kids buying into what we're doing, what we're preaching each day, coming to practice and investing in that in each other, and believing in each other and picking each other up. So that's, I think, is super important.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's almost palpable, watching you guys play from the dugout to dugout or from the stands or just looking at box scores. You speaking of Appleton going to state, now you guys are on this upward trajectory, and I know you probably hate hearing that because you're always fearful of what could be, but your trips to Appleton, what are some lessons you've learned? How does it help you prepare for the next season or maybe your opportunity to go there again?
Yeah. Man, the 3 years ago when we went there, to say I really didn't know what to expect is an understatement. Going back this second time, I felt so much more comfortable just about the process, the timing, where we would be, the pregame, expectations, right? The first time you go there, you're kind of overwhelmed by it all, and you're trying to enjoy the moment, but also, you realize you got a really big game on hand, and you're trying to do something special that hasn't been done here in a long time. So, Appleton in itself is just special. Getting there, you realize how difficult it is, doing this job for, 12 years now, you understand, just getting there once is difficult, and getting there twice and trying to get back, how hard that's going to be. And I think this second time I tried to enjoy it a little bit more, because you realize how hard it is. But also just we were so much more comfortable in the environment this time, and kind of knew what to expect. And we had some guys that were on that team 3 years ago that had, even if they weren't playing a lot, they had at least experienced it. So that was invaluable for us. How do we use that to propel us forward? Well, I think, just getting there, right, is motivating enough. Once you've been there, you want to get back there again. And I think, this last year we were able to win one versus Arrowhead there. And I think returning 90% of our team from that year's team, this group's extremely motivated. They, every year is different, but they're extremely motivated and excited to get going, because I think they realize how special it is to play for your school, to represent something, bigger than yourself, and do it with a group of guys that you really care about. But anytime you're there, you just realize how good the teams are, right? You just pay attention to all the things they do, and you're like, man, okay, coming into this season, what are some areas? We lost it up here. Extremely well coached team. They did things to us in that game that we hadn't had done to us all season. We were usually the team doing that to other teams. So how do we fine tune those small details even more? How do we lengthen our lineup? How do we, pitching these days, everybody throws hard. How do we develop these kids that throw really hard, but not just to be throwers, but also, pitchers, and develop off-speed stuff and secondary pitches that, we can use in those big moments. So I think all those things are super motivating, and things that you reflect on and you learn from, and you cherish just being able to play in big games like that.
That's a perfect segue. And maybe you mentioned this already, and maybe hit on it a couple times, but some of the best leadership advice you've gotten, right? I know you're a learner, you're a reader, you're going to clinics, you and your staff are always working on something. That's pretty clear as I hear you talk about all these other lessons learned. But you talked about being authentic and being authentically yourself. Is there any other pieces of leadership advice that someone's given you that really, really sat with you?
I mean, yeah, I've had so many really good people around me, and coaches that, have taught me things. And I think, I was reading a book not long ago, and there was a quote in the book. The book was about one of the most successful sporting teams, rugby team, called the All Blacks from New Zealand. And one of the things in the book that they did is the importance of all the players making sure that, they called it sweeping the sheds, or making sure that the locker room was completely spotless. And that was a responsibility they had as a team. And one of the quotes in that book was, never be too big to do the small things that need to be done. And I think that's a message not just for the players, but the coaches, right? I'm not going to ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. To be a leader, you got to be it's not demanding, a freshman or a sophomore to pick up all the equipment. It's you doing it on your own, you setting the example, setting the tone. And I think, from a leadership perspective, that's what I want my players to see in me, that I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to support them. I'm going to have their back 100% all along the way. And they can trust me and know that I'm going to be that for them. So I think that's just something that, has really stuck with me, in my journey as a coach, and something that I would like all of them to take, with them when they leave here.
What else are you working on this off season? You and your staff, you talked about, at least at the varsity level, you got, 90% of kids are back, a lot of spots. You feel like you got strong senior leaders. Is there anything else you guys are working on? If it's in the skill development side, if it's in the game management side, you mentioned lengthening your lineup, some other things. So when I bring that up, what are you working on this off season?
Yeah, I would say, we're spending a lot of time on just the catching position in general. I've been very fortunate. I've had 2 D1 catchers and now a D2 catcher that I had for 4 years that just graduated. And we got some talented guys coming up, but just digging into that catching position a lot more. There's a lot of, changes, and we were just at the WBCA clinic, and there's a lot of conversations around catching 1 knee, 2 feet, lots of things that go into that. So just kind of digging into that a little bit, deeper in how can we get our kids prepared and put them in the best positions. That's one of the probably the only position I never played growing up. So you're learning a lot just kind of through reading and videos and kind of deciphering lots of different information and, clinic stuff. So that's definitely an area that we're focused on. And how do we, now that we're going to have maybe a kid that isn't as experienced that we had, do we use that communication system where we're kind of taking charge? Because I've always been a big believer in allowing our kids to call a game with input, but how do we move that forward is definitely an area that we're focused on.
I appreciate you doing that. All right, well, I'm getting down to my last question here. So this is kind of where I cut the mic and let you roll us out here. So take as much time as you need. Brian Kane, $1 million question. Like, what do you know now you wish you knew, when you were that 25-year-old know-it-all coach? Like all these lessons along the way, maybe package it up for us. And if there's anything else you have that for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say lean into building relationships. Surround yourself with really good people. Success is never just one person. It takes the entire community, players, coaches, parents, administrators. And the more you can lean in and build really good relationships and interactions with people, the more you're going to get people to buy into what you're doing. The more they're going to help you, the more they're going to support you and stand by you in those difficult times when you have those, difficult situations, whether it be a player or a parent. I think the more you can lean into those relationships, the more you're going to get out of this job, and the more rewarding it's going to be. Because obviously the wins are rewarding, but ultimately the relationships that we're building day in and day out when players are coming back and they want to visit your program or they want to, coach, even come back and coach with you. I think some of that to me is the most rewarding stuff when they come back and they go, man, I had a great experience here. I'd love to be on your coaching staff. Or, I can't wait for my kids to play with you. Or, you get invited to the graduation parties because you had such an impact on those kids' lives. So I just think lean into the relationships and surround yourself with good people would probably be my advice.
And there it is. Huge thank you goes out to Coach Morman for jumping out with us today. Like I said, a lot of great nuggets within this episode. Another one of the programs that are on seems like a meteoric rise across the state. They seem to have it rolling. I know, for whatever polls are worth, I know we talked about in the episode, but preseason ranked, to be right in there by the coaches, and do with that as you will. But expectations are high. The standard is high. As we get started here, it'll be fun to watch what goes on down in their conference and take a peek at the end of the season and see where they end up. So another one of our great young coaches in the state of Wisconsin. Like I said, they have their brand, they have their way that they play. They're fiery guys. Jake's a competitive guy himself. But I love his reflection and some of the things he's worked through and his pouring into relationships. So anyways, listeners, I appreciate you tuning in. Like I said, I'll get some more episodes out. I've been slacking. I got a few more to get out before the season gets started here. But until then, have a great rest of your day.